At the recent round of consultations, I was surprised and concerned to learn that Reigate's infant junior school structure for primary education was not considered when identifying a suitable site. Approximately 80% of those attending Priory feed through Holmesdale. Many of those will have siblings attending Holmesdale. This makes double drop-off pick-up a daily reality that many parents have to contend with. A local survey shows that currently 81% of those surveyed walk or cycle. This drops to just 12% if this proposal should go ahead. Why? Well, although the council rightly states that the new site is a move of 0.8 miles, seemingly small changes can have a big impact on daily lives. Let's bring this to life. Assuming a central Reigate location, on average, a Priory pupil will walk an additional 1.6 miles a day, a total of 14 miles a week. A Holmesdale pupil will walk an extra 3.2 miles a day, a total of 31 miles a week. And a parent will walk an additional 3.2 miles a day and a total of 39 miles a week. I hope that the council can acknowledge that expecting 4 to 7-year-olds to walk 31 miles a week, equivalent of a weekly trek to Brighton, is not feasible or healthy, especially given the school timings and safety concerns of the proposed route that also rule out cycling and scooting. Further, that it will push those that can to drive and isolate those that can't. Taking that as read, my follow-up question for the council is, at the planning and development meeting, we were informed that the travel plan, including any support for those exceeding the guidelines set out in the Home to School Travel and Transport Guidance, statutory guidance for local authorities, would be for the school to develop with the support of Surrey County Council Education Team. Your response to my question of what does the council consider to be a reasonable distance for the primary school children to walk to school only quotes the relevant section of this guidance, which sets out that additional support is required for those with a walk exceeding 2 miles. As set out, the distances being covered exceed these maximums. So please can the council explain how it intends to support these families and ensure they retain access to a full state primary education provision, addressing whether Surrey County Council will use common sense when applying the statutory 2-mile guidance, and specifically that this will reflect the education structure and its impact on walking distances I highlight above. What support under these guidelines will look like, given the numbers involved, and who will be responsible for its cost and organisation, and whether, given this context, you can still agree that this can truly serve the children and the community that depend on it.
We have officers present that manage our homeschool transport service. We've just had a full policy refresh, which has been fully consulted upon, and we had a very good response to that, which has all been factored into the refresh policy going forward. How should we manage that response, Liz?
I just wondered, just for my own benefit, could you just summarise the specific questions that you had at the end so that I can make sure that I'm framing them and answering the question as precisely as possible?
No problem.
And then we'll invite, perhaps, based on... Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So the first one is, are you going to look at the impact of the infant school and junior school structure when calculating the walking distances that then you apply the statutory guidance to? The second one was, when you are then looking at the support required, what is that going to look like, given the numbers, and who bears the cost and organisation of it? And then the final one is whether with this context you still feel this proposed site location can really still give the community that depends on it access to the education that they deserve.
In terms of the first question, the impact and the organisation, the calculation of the walking distances, that is set out very clearly and precisely as a part of our policy, and the policy that has just been redesigned and developed. That's just for signposting, has been through the Cabinet recently for decision making, and indeed there's a part of that decision making on the agenda for today for the post-16 travel as well, for the older children in this particular area. So that will set out precisely how the walking distance will be calculated, and of course that will be from home to the new location of the Reigate Priory School. In terms of the support required and the way that will be organised, and the cost, I'm going to invite Hayley Connor perhaps just to answer that question, and then we'll come back to the site accessibility if we can.
Thank you, Liz. Unfortunately, I've just put in the chat that I was unable to hear the speaker's question when it was repeated, so I would be very grateful either if my colleague Eamon, who's in the room, is able to answer, or if it could be repeated.
Eamon Gilbert's in the room. He can answer the question.
The policy that's just been approved through Cabinet obviously reflects the National Homeschool Transport Policy. It's a mainstream and a special educational needs policy, and it makes clear that there's a walking distance of 2 miles and 3 miles for 2 miles for primary and 3 miles for secondary, and any pupils that were outside those distances would be eligible for home to school travel assistance. And there's an application and an assessment process, but the appropriate transport arrangements were put in place if they were eligible under that criteria.
In terms of part 3, I might just invite my colleague Mike Singleton to come in. He's the school organisation lead for us as a county council.
And that was about giving support to the measures being introduced. Is that am I
and
correct?
Also whether it's an accessible site.
Okay, yeah. And whether it's accessible. In terms of accessibility, I think we'll always fall back on the walking distances as defined within the legislation. So for under 8s, 2 miles; for over 8s, 3 miles. In terms of the policy, which Eamon has already referred to, that would in itself would also look to parents who are on low incomes and so forth, and 2 miles would then apply for primary. Is it a reasonable location? It's a reasonable distance from North Reigate, because it is by definition within walking distance. I know it's not necessarily convenient or necessarily very nice the way the traffic works at the moment, but in terms of its location, I think it is accessible.